So you want to own a vineyard. Rolling hills of vines catching the evening light, a stone farmhouse, a glass of your own wine on the porch at sunset. It's one of the most romantic purchases money can make. And right now, in real time, it might also be one of the worst. Because in 2025, California growers left roughly 1/5 of the state's entire wine grape crop sitting unharvested on the vine. Not because of drought, not because of fire, but because nobody would pay them enough to justify the cost of picking it. The state's total vineyard acreage has shrunk from around 600,000 acres to under 480,000 in just a few years. Growers are ripping out vines by the tens of thousands of acres. This is the worst grape glut the industry has seen in a generation, happening at the exact moment a new generation of drinkers has simply decided to drink less wine. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it actually costs to own a vineyard, why the wine in the bottle is one of the smallest costs in the entire chain, who legally stands between every bottle you make and every person who might buy it, whether you like it or not, and why so many vineyard owners are making money right now while so many others are walking away from their own land. Owning a vineyard isn't one business. It's three, all wearing the same rows of vines. Version 1, the grape grower. You own land, you farm grapes, and you sell the fruit itself, by the ton, to a winery that does the actual winemaking. No bottling, no label, no tasting room. This is agriculture, full stop, and your income depends entirely on a grape price you don't control. Version 2, the full estate winery. You grow the grapes, you make the wine, you bottle it under your own label, and ideally, you sell a meaningful share of it directly to visitors and wine club members instead of through a middleman. This version costs dramatically more to run, but it captures nearly every layer of markup between vine and glass instead of handing it away. Version 3, the trophy vineyard. A handful of acres in Napa or Sonoma, bought less as a business and more as a lifestyle asset, where the economics barely matter because the land itself, the status, and the weekends spent there are the actual return. Buying vineyard land alone typically runs somewhere between $5,000 and $25,000 an acre in most wine regions. In a prestige appellation like Napa or Sonoma, that same acre can run anywhere from $100,000 to over $500,000 before a single vine is in the ground. Then comes establishment, clearing, trellising, irrigation, and planting, which typically adds another $25,000 to $60,000 per acre. If you want an actual winery building and a tasting room on top of the vineyard itself, add anywhere from $500,000 to well into the tens of millions, depending on how ambitious the estate is. And here's the part that catches almost every first-time buyer off guard. Newly planted vines take 3 to 5 years to reach full production. That's 3 to 5 years of land payments, labor, irrigation, and equipment maintenance, with essentially no wine to sell. A vineyard isn't a business you buy and switch on. It's a business you fund for half a decade before it says a single word back to you. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Grapes are supposed to be the foundation of the entire cost structure, and yet the price of a ton of grapes varies by more than 10 times, depending purely on the region printed on the label. A ton of grapes from a high-volume growing region can sell for a few $100s. That same ton of Cabernet Sauvignon grown in Napa Valley can sell for over $5,000. Same fruit, same species, wildly different price, almost entirely because of the name of the dirt it grew in. Now take an actual $50 bottle of wine and follow the money. Industry cost analyses put the raw production cost, the grapes, the fermentation, the barrel time, at around $10, only 20% of what you paid. Once you add in the winery's own marketing, sales, administration, and distribution costs, the true cost to get that bottle out the winery door climbs to around $22, 44% of the retail price. The remaining $28, more than half the price on the shelf, is markup. Winery markup, wholesaler markup, and retail markup stacked on top of each other, each one taking their layer before the bottle ever reaches your hand. Now, for the part almost nobody outside the industry understands, and it's not a business decision, it's federal law. After Prohibition ended in 1933, the United States built what's called the three-tier system. Producers make the wine, distributors buy it and move it. Retailers and restaurants sell it to you. In most states, a winery is legally barred from selling directly to a retailer or restaurant. The law, called a tied house law, exists specifically to prevent that vertical shortcut. This would matter less if there were thousands of distributors competing for a winery's business. There aren't, not anymore. In the 1990s, there were roughly 3,000 wine and spirits distributors in the country and around 1,800 wineries looking for a way to market. Today, there are almost 12,000 wineries and barely 1,000 distributors left standing. The number of sellers exploded. The number of legally required buyers collapsed. That is not a market working in the winery's favor, and one company sits at the top of what's left. Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits, formed from a 2016 merger of two family distribution businesses, now moves roughly a third of all the wine and spirits sold in the United States, operating in 47 states with more than 20,000 employees. In December 2024, the Federal Trade Commission filed an antitrust complaint against the company, alleging it charged smaller independent retailers higher prices than larger chains for the exact same product. For a small vineyard owner with a few thousand cases of wine, getting picked up by a company this size can be the difference between the wine reaching a shelf at all or sitting in a warehouse. This is exactly why so many small wineries have pushed hard into direct-to-consumer sales, mailing wine straight from the tasting room to a customer's door, a legal workaround now available in 48 states. It's currently a roughly $4 billion slice of the industry, and it is, for a small producer, the only channel where the winery keeps the entire markup instead of handing most of it to a tier of the business it's never allowed to skip. Put the land, the labor, and the legal structure aside for a second, because right now, the timing of all of this could not be worse. Total U.S. wine sales actually grew slightly in 2025, crossing $115 billion. But that number is misleading. It grew because people traded up to pricier bottles, not because they bought more wine. Case volume, the actual number of bottles moving, kept falling. Underneath that, there's a structural oversupply problem that's been building since consumption started sliding back in 2022. Wineries were slow to cut production, and by the middle of 2025, industry analysts estimated wineries were sitting on roughly 30% more inventory than the market could reasonably absorb. The correction that followed was brutal. California's 2025 grape crush came in at the smallest level in 25 years, growers pulled tens of thousands of acres of vines out of the ground, and as mentioned, a fifth of the crop that did grow was never even picked. For a vineyard owner who locked in a grape contract years ago, or who owns land in a region without a name valuable enough to command a premium, this is a genuinely dangerous moment. For an owner who built a small, well-run estate around direct-to-consumer sales and a loyal wine club instead of dependence on the distributor tier, it's a very different story because that owner was never as exposed to the glut in the first place. Scenario 1. A 10-acre boutique estate in a solid, non-trophy wine region. The owner planted with patience, survived the 3 to 5 year production gap on savings instead of debt, and built the business around a tasting room, a wine club, and direct shipping instead of chasing a distributor contract. Roughly 70% of the wine sells direct at full retail markup, keeping every layer of margin that would otherwise go to a wholesaler. In a difficult year for the wider industry, this estate still nets somewhere in the 15 to 20% range because its customers are loyal, its price point never depended on shelf placement, and it was never fighting for a distributor's attention in the first place. Scenario 2. The same size vineyard, same quality of fruit, in the same difficult year, but built around the traditional model. Grow the grapes, sell most of the wine through a single regional distributor, and hope for a good allocation on the shelf. The distributor cuts orders because its own retail accounts are overstocked from 2 prior vintages. A portion of the harvest goes to a bulk buyer at a price barely above the cost of picking it. Without a direct sales channel to fall back on, this vineyard is left holding inventory. It can't move at a price it can't control, in the middle of the worst glut the industry has seen in 25 years. The land is the same. The grapes are the same. The difference is entirely about who stood between the vineyard and the customer, and whether that owner ever had the option to say no to them. So the next time someone describes owning a vineyard as buying a piece of paradise, that's true, right up until the harvest is ready and it's time to find someone willing to pay for it. The wine was never really the product. The land, the years of patience before the first bottle ever sells, and control over the one channel the law can't force you to share. That's the actual asset. Right now, across California, that lesson is being learned in real time, one unharvested row at a time.